listening to this or watching this from an international audience perspective. Can you tell us a little bit more about Tink and, I mean, how it came about?
Yes, sure. So, I mean, we like to think ourselves as the rails and brains of open banking. On the rail side, we build connectivity in 13 markets, 2,500 banks, that allows our customers to aggregate data and to initiate payment into bank accounts in these banks. On top of that, we build a platform and add a data product that makes it super simple for our customer, financial institutions, to kind of leverage this infrastructure. It's all delivered platform as a service, and then our customer, ranging from Klarna, PayPal, fintech unicorns to BNP Paribas or NatWest, they all consuming this, either adding functionalities in their front-end applications or to the CRM systems or risk management systems. So basically making leveraging open banking very simple.
Very, very good. And like you say, it's gone rather well, hasn't it? When were you founded, Tink?
So Tink was founded back 2012. And back then there was literally no B2B market around. Most people said you're going to go to jail for reverse engineering those bank APIs. So we started launching a consumer application, actually. And then we started to go back and forth to Brussels to say, well, guys, this needs to be regulated. Primarily for us not wanting to go to jail. 2015-16, then we had the adoption of PSD2, the regulatory framework surrounding open banking in Europe. And then all of a sudden, there was a B2B market that was opening up. And we pivoted and said, the exact same technology that we've been refining for the past few years, we can now deliver to a larger audience.
Fantastic. And like you say, it's working with, really big fintechs, small fintechs, big banks, small banks. Actually, the power up that you guys are doing from an infrastructural perspective is pretty impressive. I mean, how's that journey been?
Well, it's a constant struggle, isn't it? So we've been, and I think that's the fun part as well, the struggle. But we've grown a lot, going from 30, 40 people 3 years ago to now 300 people, going from one office to 10 offices across the 13 markets where we are, and trying to integrate these 2,500 banks, to one unified API to make it super simple for our customers to use. Obviously a bit of hassle, but the fun ride.
Well, yeah, I mean, I always say you've got to kind of love that struggle to a certain degree, haven't you? If you love the journey from getting from nowhere to somewhere, then it makes it a lot more enjoyable, doesn't it? For sure.
I think it's going to be problematic for us at some point, but because I think that both me and my co-founder Frederick, we are contrarians. We like to do things differently, and open banking wasn't the hottest topic a few years ago, and now we even have a breakfast show about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, what's going to be the next contrarian move to make it that stage when it's like that band that you liked before everybody else thought it was cool, right? When everybody else starts liking it and they get to number one, then it's time to kind of move on to something a bit more risque at that stage, isn't it? But go on, sorry.
No, I think it could also be that we are the guys who's with no sense of fashion, who's just super fashionable once every 20 years, and this is our time in the limelight. So we might be contrarian sooner than we want.
Well, enjoy it while the sun is shining, I guess. I mean, speaking of sun is shining and everything that leads in terms of people going outside. I mean, the lockdown, just to kind of talk a little bit for anybody who doesn't know, Sweden's had a little bit a different sort of approach to the lockdown. That you guys over there haven't been so strict, have you, in terms of where people can go and what they can do?
I think it's well, it is a difference, but I think it's more a perception. It looks more as a difference from the outside here. Sweden is a consensus culture. So we don't like the hierarchies and people pointing and guards and police in the streets. So the government politely asks us to stay inside, work remotely, social distancing, and then we follow. So it is a difference, and we've been fortunate with that, but not that different.
Well, it's been a strange period, isn't it? I mean, like you say, with having that many offices, and I think you said 300 people. How have you guys kind of found moving to remote work during this period?
It's been a positive experience for most people. I think that especially on the engineering side, and the vast majority of people I think are engineers. That's a way to increase productivity. At least if you manage to stay out of the constant small check-in meetings at Hangout or similar. I think for the I wouldn't say the more creative side, because engineers are obviously extremely creative as well. But certainly there are parts of the organization that feels like, shit, I'm in this one bedroom apartment. I'm not seeing anyone. I get my daily dose of people at work, and I like that. I think that's the hardest thing to cope with. It's going to be really interesting now also seeing, because meeting the Swedish consensus. The Swedish consensus culture is also the craving for summer. I mean, we have such a shitty weather here, so when sun is shining and we get those 4 or 5 weeks of vacation midsummer, then we really want to be able to travel. And I think that this can be the clash of a culture here, and see what happens if we are forced to stay inside.
I can definitely attest to it being a bit nippy over there. I was saying to you just before we recorded, I met one of my good friends. I think he's a bit of a legend reporter, Monty Munford, in a Swedish prison in Karlskrona, while doing a Hyper Island masterclass. If anybody who's watching this, if you've not heard of Hyper Island, they sort of rewire your brain when it comes to sort of management thinking. It's a really, really interesting course. But yeah, Karlskrona is a super interesting place. But Sweden is absolutely stunning. But like you say, it gets a bit nippy, doesn't it? I have to say.
No. So let's hope we'll be able to travel. Unfortunately, it seems that our kind of loose corona prevention has also caused us to be banned in a few different countries. I don't know what Cyprus or Greece or some countries said. Well, most people in the Nordics are allowed, but not the Swedes. And that's of course very hurtful for us.
It just makes you want to go to Cyprus even more, doesn't it? It's that contrarian coming out in you again, isn't it? So
exactly.
Everybody over on LinkedIn, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I see we're getting people from all over the planet. So Joshua, good morning, I was going to say, but good evening to you. You're joining us over from New Zealand. Thank you so much for joining us. Fernando over in Madrid. Good morning, Fernando. Lots of people joining us from all over the place. So if you guys have got any questions or anything that you want to drop it into the LinkedIn chat, and we'll weave it in towards the end of this conversation. Daniel, I think it was back in March you guys announced you were joining forces with Eurobit Technology. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and sort of what that partnership really meant?
So Eurobit is a leader in aggregation based in Spain, 50 people or so, with extremely strong footprint in Spain, Portugal, Italy, France. I believe that eventually there's going to be $1 billion that's going to be invested in a global platform connecting 100,000 banks. We're dead focused on Europe for now, but joining forces gives us more power to invest. And I think that the likes of BBVA and Santander, Sabadell, and the fintech companies in those markets to join forces and working with them is a fantastic opportunity. So, and I mean, I know Arturo, the founder and the CEO, for 8 years now. So when the opportunity arises, then we despite the corona circumstances, we act fast.
That's amazing. Like I say, it's with all these different countries having different impact, but there being big incumbent organizations within them as well, then actually like you say, the sort of completionist of the filling out map from a European perspective makes a lot of sense. I mean, are you looking at any other, obviously you won't be able to name names, but I guess you'd be open to other partnerships in that basis, because, or even acquisitions, I guess, at this stage, because there are big organizations in every market, aren't there?
Yeah, so I mean, the acquisition of Eurobits, I think that when partnering or doing something together with someone that's so close to your core business, then it needs to be an acquisition for it to work out. But we also work with a lot of adjacent businesses, whether they be credit scorer or banking platforms, etc. I think that there will be a consolidation wave, and we definitely want to take an active part in that. I think that we were very fortunate to raise 90 million euros just before the crisis. So it's, I wouldn't say it's a luxury, because it's tough time for everyone, but our business is largely unaffected. So we can make this forward-leaning moves, and I'm very happy about that, and I'm very happy to partner with a great team at Eurobits as well.
Yeah, I remember talking about that on FinTech Insider News. Actually, it was fantastic timing for that raise, as you say, just before everything really sort of happened, didn't it? It kind of means, as you say, your business can pretty much continue as it was. If anything, brings the change in valuations for other companies, brings about potentially some opportunities there as well, doesn't it?
I think that just as the move from offline to online kind of is speeded up through Corona and a few other trends, I see that people who would prefer to be in a larger setting or want to partner up, I think that people are making those moves now rather than wait for a year. So we have definitely more inbounds about those conversations, and we're happy to engage.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure there'll be people watching this who'll be hammering your email very shortly then after that. But a few questions sort of coming in on LinkedIn. So if I sort of dip into a few of those. So Ronit Goose, hey Ronit, how you doing? Good morning. Open banking regulations in the UK and PSD2 in Europe. How did this help Tink? How many big banks do more than pay lip service to open banking, do you think? Because I mean, a lot of people have sort of spoken about open banking, and then really what we've seen within the big banks is, you know, aggregation and not much more. But do you think the big banks are sort of playing lip service to it at the moment, or do you think actually they're actually doing things in the background?
So first of all, I think that in EU, I mean, the US has taken a different approach, a non-regulatory approach, maybe as usual, but the legal situation was so unclear and kind of so hostile in Europe a few years ago. So I think it's easy now to say, well, we wouldn't want regulations, but the B2B market and the larger kind of open banking way was non-existing 2-3 years ago. So I think it's been instrumental. I think it's been definitely a shift in mindset from the larger banks. I mean, we have more than 5,000 developers on the platform. Smaller ones, of course, their mindset has been, you know, win this through open banking. But for the larger ones, it's been a shift over the past 1-2 years, where they go from, say, well, I need to be compliant, to I want to be a winner in this. It's a massive difference. I think that if you look at proof points that would look like, well, this is a massive open banking investment, that will not be seen. So if you take someone like PayPal, a customer of ours, that is replacing the penny transfer to validate a bank account, and do that through account aggregation, you know what account it is, and you know there's money in the account instantly. For most consumers, they wouldn't even notice. For an industry reporter, they wouldn't say, well, it changed everything. But that would increase conversion by some 30%. Well, it's a game changer for a lot of these companies. Yeah. I think that this will be a boring plumbing that you kind of never see, but it just makes your financial life slightly more smooth.
Well, definitely. I mean, leader from our side at 11FS says plumbing is finally getting sexy, isn't it? Because, like say, it has been the thing that has inhibited people being able to not only deliver capability, but actually do it in a way that doesn't cost a ridiculous amount just to maintain the operation there. So, I mean, if you tried to construct the service that you guys have with screen scraping and all the different things that are around it, reliability in those systems, the regulation, PSD2 and everything that's happened with the CMA9 and open banking in the UK, it really has changed the game, hasn't it, in terms of the, like say, deep-seating sort of underlying infrastructure. I mean, you guys came out with a report, I think literally this morning, didn't you? Actually looking at European open banking investments. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I think that there's two things that are striking. So we've surveyed, I think, 300 large medium financial institutions in 12 markets. Two things. One is 65% is more positive towards open banking this year compared to last year when we also did the survey. And I think that is something that we truly feel. Bankers see the fintechs really leveraging this in smart ways. And they want to do the same. And you even see some of the large banks that are definitely on par with the fintech. So I think that's amazing. Second one is that they're spending a lot of money. I think that medium spend for these surveyed institutions is between 50 and 100 million euros. Okay. And when you look at the driver of these investments, it would be customer experience, which they put first as the major driver. And I think that these things combined, I think it's a much more positive outlook than we saw a year ago, because then this was largely driven by compliance. So big difference here.
It is. I mean, like you say, the compliance agenda has definitely been, adhering to the regulation. But do you think now, like you say, that spend is really sort of going into things that they want to do, as in, product innovation or experience improvements, rather than, like you say, just the things that they have to do?
Well, it's the things, I think that they state four things as a driver of this. One would be customer experience. The second one would be to kind of simplify processes, internal, external. Then it's about IT modernization in general, and fourthly about compliance. But it's funny because the only market is kind of an outlier from a spending perspective this year is the UK, where the number of people spending more than 100 million euros is significantly less than in the other large European countries. And I wonder if that has to do with the fact that open banking is more advanced. I think the fact that CMA is running it and so on, and you've done it ahead of the rest of Europe, has been a super smart move for your community, the finance community in general. But I wonder if you're over the boring part of the investment, because you can also see that the UK now is focusing on the customer experience more than other markets that might have still regulations to catch up with.
Well, like you say, I think with the regulation sort of kicking in here and the CMA9 getting ahead of it a little bit, hopefully we, as you say, we start sort of getting to the good bit, which is real leaps when it comes to the experiential side of things in terms of what people are doing with it. But I mean, it feels like open banking isn't done though, and I feel PSD2 will inevitably be followed by what we do from PSD3 and PSD4, and actually there's already talk of open banking going in various different routes. I know if you talk to Imran from an open banking's perspective in the UK, he's very focused on what comes next. It isn't just about payments. Actually, it's about the broadness of openness of data. And even actually, if you look out into markets like Australia, they're already doing much more sort of open data views. Where do you see open banking going? Do you think it will move beyond payments and data aggregation to a lot broader opportunities?
Well, I think that you're going to see, first of all, now you see the 5-10% of the most obvious use cases being implemented. I think that you'll see smart part of this plumbing to be in basically every single process at these large financial institutions or the fintech companies. And I think that over the coming years, you'll definitely see that going from 5-10 to 100% instead. There will be a continuous movement. This is not done. I think it's fair to say, and being close to regulators now for the past 5-6 years, I think it's fair to say that it will continue to evolve. It will never be done, an investment perspective, it might be convenient for us saying, well, now the PSD2 APIs are done, we've implemented them, Tink is now final, and it's just never going to happen. And I think that what you're going to see also is a convergence of the connectivity services with the data services, which is basically the two mega ways in banking. We see banking going from analog to digital and from closed to open. And what we're trying really to do here is to combine these two products.
Yeah, I mean, we have a very similar view. I think the challenge is I see you guys are building a digital system. I think a lot of the banks have sort of digitized themselves, and actually you really, from an infrastructure perspective, offer that ability for those guys to go from that digitized state into the digital, which I think is really, really interesting. And I personally, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth here, but personally, I'd say with regards to what comes next, I think for the organizations that are in a position where they have the trust of the big organizations and have the capability of the small organizations in terms of the innovation around fintech and everything that you can do from a technology perspective, as open banking gets broader and broader and broader, those organizations such as yourself, I think, are in such an amazing situation, because if you've created technology and trust to do this piece and suddenly it broadens out, which I inevitably see it doing, then you're already onto such an amazing thing. I think it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So I see a incredibly bright future ahead for people like yourself in this market, where you can create those both sides of that market, which is good. Some really interesting questions over there. So Raul, so Daniel, where do you see new opportunities coming from? Do you think it's in the mature systems or the underbanked regions? Do you think there's opportunities to do more where there is less banking or more?
Well, it's actually both, because I mean, on the underbanked side, you see that real-time credit scoring for underbanked people, it's such an amazing opportunity. Looking in Mexico and a few other markets where actually Eurobits had operations for a few years. On the other hand, those markets would be in numbers, so you could serve millions and millions of people. Whereas if you go to the large kind of traditional, the Nordics or the Benelux or the UK, these markets are so enormous. So if you can move the needle 5 or 10% and help your customers do better, then that's going to have an enormous impact even for society. So I like to say both. And when we look at our customer base, it's I mean, in numbers, the fintechs would be so many more. I mean, there would be hundreds or even thousands if you counted the developers. And the large banks, they would be 50 to 100 instead. So we're trying to be an agnostic platform that serves everyone here.
Yeah. Have you seen, I mean, something we've been surprised at 11FS is the open banking standard being, and everything that obviously PSD2 affects the Europe, everybody within the European Union, but actually, have you found that the standards are being adopted much broader than that? I mean, we've found banks creating APIs to the open banking schema in South Africa and South America, and it really feels like it's as much as it has to be adhered to within Europe, then the impact of it is much more globally.
So if you look at it globally, definitely people are looking at Europe, and there are open banking discussions or even adoptions now in most part of the world. They're looking at Europe not necessarily for success, but what we did well and what we didn't do great. I think if you look at from a national perspective, it might look that you see a lot of standardization. I can tell you that working and looking maybe at the top 10 banks or something, but if you look at the long tail of 2,500 banks, I'll tell you that's not much of a standardization. That would be different APIs. It would be different, country-specific behavior, authentication flows, key fobs, and whatnot. So it's still a bit of a mess.
Yeah. It's like I say, it does feel like the regulatory approach is the only way to kind of get to a point where people have to do things collectively, don't they? I mean, obviously in the US right now, it's more a business-led design approach, isn't it, in terms of designing what that standard could be and how it could work, which inevitably will benefit the bigger organizations rather than the smaller organizations in terms of how that's handled. So it's going to be a fascinating one to see how it moves on. But I mean, we're a big believer that the fundamental fabric of financial services is up for change over the next 5+ years. And I'd say it's organizations that, like yourself, that are really at the forefront of moving those things forward. So congratulations with all the success that you've had. I feel like we're coming to the top of the hour, so we probably should let everybody get on with their days. But Daniel, where can people learn a little bit more about you and everything that you're doing at Tink?
So tink.com would be the best place, and love for you to reach out directly to me, Daniel at tink.com as well.
And where can people go and get hold of the research report that you guys have published today?
That would be tink.com as well, and on our LinkedIn page.
Fantastic. It's a really interesting read, guys. I picked out a couple of the stats from it this morning, and really, really interesting. So open banking, definitely not something that's going to be going away anytime soon. So the more you know, the better. So again, Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. Tomorrow, guys, we're going to be joined by Roland Meisters, who is the CEO and co-founder at Nordigen. But super, super interesting conversation this morning. Really appreciate you guys making the time to come and see us. That's all we have for you today. See you same time, same place tomorrow. Stay safe, guys. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.